computer. Perfect. Sweet. Donovan, my dude, welcome to the podcast. I'm really, first and foremost, before we get into it, grateful that you're spending some time with me today. I know you have a very extremely busy schedule. I'm glad, I know we postponed it already, but I'm really glad we were able to make it work today. So thank you very much for squeezing me in, and I appreciate you being here, man. So thanks. Welcome to the show.
I'm honored. My schedule is busy. That's because I am working on growth mindset. I'm working on time management more, but I think that these opportunities are really important, and I feel really honored anytime anyone will share their platform with me to kind of lift the work up and talk about, what it is I'm doing in the world. So thank you for having me, and thanks for being flexible because I think this is
Amazing.
like the
Yeah.
third time you've had to reschedule with me. So thanks for being so flexible.
Yeah, no worries, man. No worries. I'm just glad we were able to make it work finally. So, with that being said, so for people who don't know you, kind of take us through your transition period, kind of the timeline of your life so far from leaving post-secondary, that era or that timeline or time frame, sorry, to where we are now, and we can kind of go back through it full circle.
Okay, when you're like, there was a time where I was like, from day one? Well,
Sort of.
In July of 1989. No, so I started working with kids. It's a little bit important, but I started working with kids when I was in college, and I focused specifically on youth development programs. And so positive youth development is something I really lift up a lot. This is a lot of like summer camps. This is your after school activities. And I started working with kids. I think, yeah, I was working at an acting company for kids, and then I was working at a gymnastics place, and I had no
Interesting.
experience in either of those things, but I was just good with the kids. And so
Yeah.
I think being, especially like being a man and like not having as many men working with younger kids, they were like, if you're good with kids, like you don't have to be good at the other things. Like that's kind
Yeah.
of the first thing we need from you. But I was going through my own identity struggle, mental health struggle for years at the time. And when I found working with kids, it really was like a saving grace for me. It was like, it gave me purpose. It was like, this is why I'm here in a time where I was kind of struggling to even want to be here.
Mhm.
And so when I was in my mid-college undergrad, I had an experience that kind of woke me up and made me start to seek out tools to kind of repair harm that had been done to me and harm that I'd done to myself. And the tools were out there, like in abundance. And so
Mhm.
I was working with these kids, and then I was learning these tools at the same time.
Yeah.
And I kind of realized, like, why are we not teaching kids these things? Like, if all these adults are spending all this money every single year
Yeah.
to basically undo what was done to them as kids, like why don't we just meet kids before that, right?
Yeah.
And
What were
so
some examples of like
of
skills?
oh yeah, so like a huge
Yeah.
one for me was gratitude, like just
Oh
learning about
wow.
gratitude, learning about things like core values, learning about how to treat yourself with like kindness and compassion, how to create like a positive identity. And so when
Jeez.
you look at yourself, a positive identity that's grounded in reality.
Yeah.
um, and things like strength identifications, things like growth mindset, all of these skills I wanted to help kids learn were to take care of themselves. And
Mhm.
um, I started teaching those things in these other programs, but that's not what those programs were intended to do. So I
Right.
kind of struck out and did my own thing. And then I got really lucky and found a school that had a space for this kind of class. And it was a program where you didn't have to be a credential teacher because I didn't go to school for teaching.
No kidding.
And
Nice.
yeah, I stepped into it and it was like wonderful. And I got to work with these kids for 2.5 years. And then the pandemic hit. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do next, but I don't want to stay in the classroom because it's already
No,
kind of a struggle. And I started a TikTok because my kids told me to. I was working with them online and I was recording the teaching, and we were having so
amazing.
many funny moments. So the kids were like, you should make a TikTok, which is shocking to me because how the hell
Yeah.
did, out of everything that's on TikTok, how did my work stand out?
Yeah, especially at
Um,
that time period too, right? Like so many
yeah,
people doing it, like consuming and creating on the platform. That's incredible.
yes, absolutely. So many people and so many really talented and funny and like educational people.
Yeah.
And I think for me, what was important was I got a chance to show the work without showing the kids.
Right.
Because especially doing personal work with kids, I never want to be exploiting them
No, of
or
course
using
not.
them to, get likes and
Yeah, that's always been a weird like area, right? Like kids and being
Mhm.
on media, especially young kids. Like
Yes.
there's a lot of lines you have to make sure you're not crossing and stuff and
Oh
check
yeah.
marks, boxes you're checking off. Yeah.
And working with like middle
Interesting.
schoolers too, it's like they're already so hyper aware of themselves and how people
Yeah.
are looking at them. And so even though these moments were really, impactful and positive, like I don't know if this 12-year-old as a 25-year-old is going to be grateful that we did this, And so
Right. Yeah.
I think having a chance to show the work without showing the kids is really special. And I was going to leave the classroom and try to make a YouTube channel and try to get into speaking for kids, which has always been my dream. And the Today Show found me like a month before I left teaching, and everything kind of blew up from there. And so I'm 2 years into out of the classroom, and I'm currently developing an educational entertainment docu-series. I'm coaching, and then I'm also finding my way around the content space, which has been very interesting. It's
Yeah.
very interesting to make content about this kind of stuff. So that's where I'm at right now.
Dude, I think what I'm very excited about to see and what I've noticed from you that I really, really gravitated towards. So one thing I will say that I really like that I'm just gonna want to talk about how we kind of got introduced to each other. And I think that pairs well with what I really enjoy about not just like your YouTube channel, your TikTok, like the content you're creating, like the coaching you're doing. And so we met through a mutual friend who told me about you and told me what you were doing, who I met through doing the podcast, through other friends connected. So all through connection, I got to you. And then I didn't know you had done the Today Show or any kind of, I knew like things about you,
Yeah.
right? But more just about you, not what you've done. Cause I also, our mutual friend, Michael, love the guy to death. He knows that
Love Michael.
I don't necessarily care too much about people's accomplishments in a weird way, if that makes sense. Cause those remain with the person.
Yeah.
So it's kind of it's a weird thing. Like I celebrate it, I support it, but those are
Yeah.
yours to have. So in terms of like, I care about the person behind that. So him leading that, like with that, in order for me to kind of be like what drew me to you was very, very like fascinating. And then the way you're very, very, you have a way to connect with people and like just be yourself and very comfortable and open that I don't think we've seen a lot of in like mainstream media or as of late, especially, and especially throughout like the pandemic and how everything's kind of risen from it. You've kind of
Mhm.
stayed true to what you've been doing and your story and everything. You haven't like you've made shifts for the better, not for like, I'm going on these shows, I'm doing these things. Like you just remain the same and the message still stayed the course. And like it's phenomenal, man. I just want to like commend you for that. It's really, really cool to see.
What a relief.
Hmm.
What a dope
Yeah.
ass thing to say to somebody, because I think what was hard for me, I've been lifting this work up for years. Like I was like 25 talking to my friends about wanting to be a public figure for kids.
Yeah.
And when I started getting the attention, there was a lot of like input. I was getting a lot of input on how to proceed, especially around making a TV show and stuff. And there's a lot of like this push to be quick and to be fast. But I think in asking me to kind of change the work to make it fit audiences, it
Yeah.
really cheapened it and it kind of disconnected me from my values. And so for a while there, I was like, man,
Mm.
I hate this shit. Like, I don't even want to
Yeah.
do this anymore. Like, put me back in the classroom where I was having an
Yeah.
impact. And more recently, I've
That's
started
frustrating.
to, yeah, and I started to kind of build some gratitude for myself to be like, you know what, I am happy I stuck with my guns, and
Mm.
I am happy that I stayed true to what I care about, and that I want this work to look a certain way because I've developed it for years. And like youth empowerment is something that we don't have enough access to. It's something that we don't
No.
see enough in these larger spaces. And so that's my goal, is to really not only create content that lifts kids up, but also helps them learn kind of how to show up in this world in a way that is sustainable, in a way that's connected to who they are and take care of themselves. And in the past few weeks, I've literally had to be like, yeah, Donovan, like you stuck to what's true to you. Like, so everything you just said to me, I'm
Yeah.
like, ah, I
It's like,
needed that. I needed that.
thank goodness.
It's been
Yeah.
tough. It's been tough. It's been a really tough emotional journey for me, transitioning into this next phase. It's like second
Hmm.
puberty. And if you've been through puberty, you know it's not fun.
Yeah. It's
And
not
that's
fun the
what it
first
feels like.
time, let alone the second. Jeez.
Second time. And then have a heightened sense of awareness and go
Yeah.
through it. And then also be putting a public face on. And it's been wild, and I've been really lucky in a lot of ways, but I also think it's important to acknowledge the struggle and the highs and the lows,
Yeah.
because there's enough people out there saying, look at how great I am, and it's like I want kids to look at me and see, like, look at how I'm trying, look at how I'm growing, look at how this
Yeah.
person is working on themselves.
Amazing. And I think I discovered all of that through the actual research process of you, and like just going through my like regular, like, oh, what media have they done? Okay, let's listen to the podcast he's been on, stuff. And yeah, just always stayed true to kind of the message has been the same. It's just been amplified into let's go. Oh man,
That's what we
let's
needed.
go. Let's
That's what
go.
we needed
That's
today.
awesome. I love it. Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
just seeing it kind of like just take different, it's stayed the same shape, but it's taken different forms, you know?
And
And I think
that's like
that's
a
been really
huge
cool.
thing. Oh, sorry, I didn't
Oh
cut
no,
you
that's
off.
all. That's all.
I think it's really cool to, like, one of the things I work with kids on is kind of identifying what their values are and
Hmm.
what their passions are and how these things can kind of change. And when you build a relationship with yourself, you can pivot. Like, and I think I used to be so afraid of trying new things or stepping
Yeah.
into different roles because it made me really insecure. But the stronger of a relationship I grew with myself, the more that I knew that no matter if I fail, if I'm successful, like, I will still have a connection to myself and what matters to
Hmm.
me. Like, it makes it so much easier to pivot, and it makes it so much easier to move through the world in a way that I'm not as attached and to the results as I was in the beginning. So it's good to kind of hear, especially that feedback after 2 years of doing this, that people are listening and being like, oh, this is the same person, because I always want to
Hmm.
be true to who I am, because that's the message for kids.
Absolutely. Now, before we transition kind of into that, I want to circle back, sorry, to that like second puberty stage where, and we kind of talked about it, our first video call, about like something happens around the age like 20, 25, like mid 20s, that you kind of make a shift. And then it's funny, after talking to you, I had another gentleman I met with to do the show later on in the month, and we talked about the same thing. So for it to be a reoccurring thing amongst like friends and like-minded people is really interesting. But
Yeah.
what I want to ask before, so you worked as a teacher and you were always involved with children, so you're able to see kind of firsthand experience and being a student yourself. And if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, you had I think it was your mother who was a teacher, right?
Yeah. Ooh, okay. Yeah. You did your research. Yes, my mom was a teacher,
Okay,
for the majority of her professional career.
cool. So what I want to know is, so you've seen it secondhand, firsthand, you've been a student, teacher, everything. So I want to know if you could, if I gave you a magic wand and you wave it and you said, Donovan, I'm going to change one thing about the current, I think it's education system or school system now, for the better, obviously. Wave magic wand, boom, fix this for the better. How would you go about doing that? Like, what would that look like in your eyes, your opinion? Having seen it all, and you could take a
That's
second to
such a
answer
good
that.
question. Honestly, I think if you would have asked me that 5 years ago, I would have had a different answer for
Oh,
you.
really?
But yeah, being in youth development and then moving into education, because youth development, like the YMCA, Boys and Girls Club, like
Yeah.
those, it's different from education. And so moving from youth development into education, I think for me, honestly, like more resources and better pay for teachers and their communities. That's first, because I think we ask so much of educators to hold so much space for learning, but
Yeah.
also for like identity development, also now social emotional. And I think you can't, if the people who are teaching the kids are not being taken care of, it has an
Mhm.
immediate trickle down effect to the kids. And it's not the teacher's fault. And
No.
so originally I would have been like, this, it's the curriculum and like grades or blah, blah, blah. But it's like,
Yeah.
no, we need to really acknowledge and take care of the people who are leading our next generation. And so I think, especially through like teacher TikTok and stuff, just all of the teachers, who put so much heart and effort and who still struggle to survive and make ends meet, and then the communities that are not given the resources that they need. it's like, I've been to some schools where it's like, we want these kids to learn gratitude, but
Yeah.
there's not even like foundational safety within the school because the teachers are so burnt out. The
Yeah.
community has such lack of access to resources.
Uh,
And so for me, it's like you got to start with the people who are showing up for the kids and not putting them through PD, because any teacher that's listening to this knows that they have probably 4 PDs a month. It's really about treating them better, because the more that teachers are taken care of, the more space and capacity they'll have to do the deeper work with kids that they
right.
intended to move into education for.
Yeah.
So I think that that's a huge thing. And I'm so grateful for any teacher that cares about their kids and is out there, working again in a system that feels like it's working against them.
Absolutely. Oh, I love that. I love that answer.
Deep answers. Pay
That's awesome.
teachers.
That's
Give them
awesome.
more
Yeah.
money.
More
Damn it.
money, more
God,
resources.
please.
Oh man. So before we dive in, a bit of foreshadowing for what I want to find out about later on. But before we dive into the self kind of awareness and like how we build that with kids, let's talk a bit about your kind of shift in your mid 20s that made you understand why that you wanted to remove yourself from the classroom and get more in front of like more of an impact, like kind of by yourself, leading the charge on what you want to do, what you believed is the best decision for you to do, and lead kind of like out of your 20s doing that. Can you take us through that
Yeah.
process, the second puberty, as you will?
Yeah, second puberty was actually kind of not about the work. I think second puberty was about me kind of reparenting myself and me learning how to build a relationship with myself. Because before, when I found this work, I said it was my saving grace, and I was like, oh, it
Yeah.
was my purpose. But in reality, I still had a really bad relationship with myself. I still struggled a lot with like substance abuse, with mental health, and the shift came because I was teaching, and I was like 26, but I was
Yeah.
teaching and my depression was just really bad. But I was basically using my classroom and these kids as like a way to feel safe and valued. So I was giving as
Yeah.
much as I could, but it wasn't sustainable. And I got to a point where I was giving out so much love and concern and trying to hold space for as many kids as I could, who I really cared about, that I had nothing left for myself. And so I was very drained. And I got to the point where I started to notice, like, okay, I'm starting to feel like I don't want to be here anymore. And I'm starting to
Yeah.
feel like I wish I wasn't me. And that's a huge warning sign, for me personally, around my mental health. So I actually went to an emergency therapist, and she helped me recognize like that a huge skill that I had missed was like self-love, like how to treat myself better. And at
Yeah.
first it felt like I was being
Interesting.
really selfish. It was like, like I focused enough on me. I got to be here for these kids. But even, honestly, like even the way that I did the work was still me trying to take care of myself. Because if these
Yeah.
kids loved and needed me and I was doing something positive, then maybe I could feel good about myself. But
Yeah.
I had to learn like that relationship with myself has to come first. Like it can't be dependent on the work that I'm doing. It can't be
Mhm.
dependent on how the roles I'm playing for other people. I've got to have a
Right.
good relationship with myself.
Like inside
And so,
first. Yeah.
yeah, and that changed a lot of my curriculum, because in the beginning, my curriculum was very like
Interesting.
personal development, like what are your goals and
Yeah.
what are your strengths? And that's still a part of my work. But then I was like, as I started to take better care of myself, I started to see these other things in my life start to heal. And I started to see these other ways that I could show up in the world that took care of me
Yeah.
and took care of other people. And that was kind of the second puberty. And that's also like the 3 skills I teach kids. Those are the things that got me out of that dark place and into doing the work of who is Donovan? How can I take care of Donovan? Because
Mhm.
Donovan has been around for years, in terms before
Yeah.
I was even doing this work, just being like everybody's homie, like
I love it.
being the
Yeah.
guy that makes, yeah, like being the guy that makes people feel better. Like that was my thing for so long, but
That's
I was using
exhausting.
it.
That sounds
Yeah,
exhausting
and I
though,
was like
dude.
using it as like a safety thing. It's like if I
Hmm.
don't play this role for people, then people won't value me. And if I'm not valued,
Oh,
then I'm not safe, right? And
right.
if I'm not, and that's a huge thing for me. And
That's tough.
that's how a lot of kids feel about education, right? Which is like, if I'm not getting
Jeez.
good grades, then I'm not valued. If I'm not valued, I'm not safe. And then people are
Yeah.
confused on why kids are hyper focusing on their friends or a hobby or something where they feel like they're valued or they're good at this
Hmm.
thing, because that makes them feel safe. So that changed a lot of like what I started teaching kids, to be like, you know what? I can't tell them how to live their lives. I
No.
just want to give them the skills to take care of themselves as they're growing and struggling and figuring these things out for themselves. I trust that if we can help kids build a relationship with themselves, that they will figure out what's best for them. And that's
Mhm.
something that we're missing. And a lot of systems kind of work against that.
Now, speaking of systems and this narrative, I think a lot of young people and kids are being asked like kind of what they want to do when they like grow up, right? Like that's been yeah, just by judging
What a
by your
question.
reaction, yeah, that's been
Yeah.
the narrative, and that's what's been painted as the way society and the system and all these trigger words will say that that's kind of what's been shaped for everybody. But you're asking a different question,
Yeah.
right? Like, what's
But
the
that's,
question you drive with? I'd like
I was like,
to
that's you're
extrapolate
so
that.
good. You're so good at this. I just ask them how they want
Thanks,
to
dude.
feel.
Yeah.
I just ask them, how do you want to feel when you get older? And for a lot of kids, I want to feel happy. I want to feel loved. I want to feel like I'm helping. I want to feel a sense of accomplishment. I want to feel proud. It starts to lean them into more of their wants and their needs. And I think that
Interesting.
that's really important for kids to think about is like, what do I want? What do I need? And then moving into more like, what do I want to offer? What are the things that I want to share with the world from myself? But I think that that's why I do a lot of work with kids around what are your values, what are your strengths, what are the experiences that help you feel flow, right? To kind of figure
Mhm.
out how I feel is a good indicator of am I in alignment with where I should be or not. If I'm working a job and I
Interesting.
feel miserable, if I'm working a job and I feel like I'm struggling or I feel disrespected or not valued, right? But a kid knows I want to feel valued where I work. That's kind of this like warning light. That's like a little warning light coming on, being like, "Ooh, something is not right," you know.
Yeah.
So helping kids, because who knows what kids don't know what they want to be when they. Sometimes they do. Excuse me. Sometimes they do, but for the
Yeah,
most
there's
part,
odd cases. Yeah.
yeah, those
Like
kids
the
are
rare
cool too.
cases.
I really like when a kid is like, I want to be a neuro
Yeah, like
science
linguistic programmer or something.
neurologist. Oh my
Yeah.
god. Okay, well, it's good.
There's
I'm
a
not teaching
bunch,
kids
I
about
think.
science.
Yeah.
I want to be a biology. I have no idea, but I think for the most part, and asking that question too also gets them thinking about how they're feeling now,
Yeah.
right? And like, what are areas, who are people that you feel safe with, who are people that you feel motivated by, what are
Smart.
causes that are exciting to you or
Yeah.
causes that cause concern to you, right? Because these are hints. And I think it's more important that kids develop that trust with themselves,
Yeah.
because that's it. Like, I don't know all these kids behind me. I don't know what any of them are going to be. I don't know what any of them are going to be, but I have so
Jeez.
much faith in them because I know that they have a heightened sense of who they
Yeah.
are in the world and they'll figure it out. But I just want to make sure that they're taking care of themselves while they're doing it, you know?
Now, question for you. Of all the kids in the back, is there first question, who's the oldest and who's the youngest? Like what's kind of the
In
age
the
range?
pictures,
Yeah, just for example,
oh,
just
well,
right there.
these pictures are like the oldest picture up here is 15 years old. One
Oh
of the
wow.
kids,
That's
yeah,
incredible.
one of the young people
Oh, that's
like
awesome.
just adopted a child with their partner. Like,
Whoa,
yeah,
good for
yeah.
them.
Yeah, they shared it with
Jeez.
me actually a couple of days
Wow.
ago, and I was like,
Oh
"You're my
man.
child." So
Oh,
I started my work with like K through two, but I
yeah.
also taught like mommy and me parent classes, and then
Yeah.
I also taught in college. So I've taught every single age. But right now, the kids that I'm working with, primarily, I like to work with middle schoolers.
Yeah.
Um, because it's a really important age in their identity development and they don't get enough love.
Like
And
young
in fact,
teenagers. Yeah.
they get a lot of hate. Like, not just they don't get love, but
Yeah.
even the way that we talk about middle schoolers as a society. Um, I want them to feel good about themselves, because that starts that process of disconnect of don't
Mhm.
like yourself or something's wrong with you.
Which is
Just the
silly.
narrative that we have, which is it's
Yeah.
unfortunate because they're like the highest need in that age where they're
Hmm.
super aware of themselves and they're so unsure and
Yeah.
they're making all these choices based off of trying to feel safe, and no one is holding space for that. I can't say that. There are a lot of
Yeah.
people in the world who are doing really amazing work holding space for those kids, but the society structure system, especially educational system,
Yeah.
doesn't really give space for that.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Huh. Now, what I'm always curious about with stuff like that is it's kind of, yeah, it kind of feels like middle school. So can you explain so I'm not sure. Middle school is from grade like what's 8 to
Yeah. So
12, 7 to 10.
it's like ages. it just depends. I think the youngest is maybe 11 and the oldest could be like 14. And there's obviously
Oh,
some differences just with
oh,
kids who are, see, look, you see what I
that's
mean? Like,
tough,
you
man.
know, it's a tough age and we all know it's a tough age. And yet we're still so judgmental and
Oh
we're so tough on
man,
that age. And we know it
what
was
is going
bad.
on?
I've only met like
Oh
two people who
man,
were like, I love middle school. And I'm like,
yeah,
ew, who
like
did you have in your life? Who was taking care of you? Like
yeah.
that is
Let's study you in a lab.
yeah, you are an
That's
outlier.
insane.
We are happy for you, but that
Oh
is not the
man,
common experience. That's when I started disconnecting from myself. That's when I started not liking
yeah.
myself.
Wow, man. Like I think that's incredible that you're able to. It sounds like what you're doing too, installing and instilling the self-awareness, especially at that age where they are self-aware, and it's just a matter of them kind of asking the right questions, right? I think that's humongous, especially at that age. But how do you go about connecting with them in a way that they feel comfortable enough to open themselves up and talk to you? Because I find a lot of kids, especially at that age, speaking from my experience in like summer camps and working in outdoor centers with them, especially at that age, they're very, very like they're kind of closed off, and they can
Mhm.
get closed off. I found in my experience at least is right after they start being like very like out there and having fun, and then a lot of people kind of slowly put them into a box, right? And then they just kind of they have to contain their like creativity or their artistry or whatever makes them unique, and they kind of have
Yeah.
to they're kind of molded, and then when they're like 12, 13, 14, they kind of play into the narrative that we've created. So I'm curious, how do you like connect with them, especially at that age, like to make them comfortable enough to open up?
I think it's the same thing I do with adults.
Yeah.
And it's going to sound silly, but this is so important for me to say is that there's a narrative around kids being these like different beings than adults. And it's
Mm-hmm.
because mainly because their brains are still developing. But in a lot of ways, that power structure, like honestly, some of the best ways that I connect with kids is being nice to them and being respectful and not like talking down to them, but just treating them like how an adult expects to be treated, and that
Yeah.
idea of like kids can't have that kind of respect or can't have that kind of like
Interesting.
empowerment from an adult is really sad to me. And so that's probably been the best way. I also think it's different because each kid is different, and so some kids like humor is a big connector for me. Kids like to laugh and I am like a big goofy ass dude and they like that.
Yeah.
I also think kids sense when you're putting on like a mask to talk to them, and so being authentic. Like I have friends who are like, I've had friends who have met kids I've worked with and have been like, hi, how is school? And they're like 14 and they're like, it's fine. And it's like there's this disconnect that
Yeah.
makes people sometimes treat kids like they're not human beings. And it's like I get it with 3-year-olds because they are honestly, they feel like a different species to me. They're so fun, but they're like all impulse
Yeah.
and just like all passion and like in all the ups and downs. But middle schoolers are so they're so much more closer, they're so much closer to us than I think we realize. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things I think that middle schoolers like about me is that instead of me kind of judging them and talking about, well, this is what you need to do in this situation, it's like
Yeah.
I share with them not only what I struggled with as a young person, but what I'm struggling with as an adult right now. And I think that especially with our education system pushing like getting the best grades and being the best all the time, and adults not letting kids in on this side of like
Yeah.
we all struggle, we all can learn, we all can grow. It's like you're the one struggling, you're growing,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what being a kid is. But that's the human condition. And hopefully, if we're doing it right, we're all learning and growing together. And so I share my struggle and I share what I'm working on with kids to normalize that it's okay to be where they're at. And it's
Mm-hmm.
okay to have moments where you don't trust yourself or you may not doubt or you doubt yourself or all these human experiences are okay for them to have,
Mm-hmm.
um, and to help them feel safer in themselves. Because when we don't open up that space, kids hold themselves to such high standards or they fight back against these high standards. Kids who are middle schoolers who are not into me like as a person, it's tough
Yeah.
because it's scary and they can be like, I
Oh,
know,
I
I'm like, I
bet.
don't like the way,
Jeez.
as a kid like me, right? But what I found is that a lot of people are moving from a place of fear. And I think that kids are
Yeah.
it's very obvious in kids like how their behaviors are them trying to protect themselves. But
Yeah.
I would say if you pay attention to adults, if you pay attention to the way adults show up, I think it's just as obvious that people are often walling themselves up or firming themselves and this is who I am and you can't question this and I'm not going to
Hmm.
change as a way to protect themselves. So I just try to treat
Yeah.
kids like I try to treat kids like people, like apologizing to
Interesting.
them, saying thank you to them, asking what they think, asking for their feedback,
Yeah.
letting them teach me. Right? It's like that's a way to show them that they have worth. And if I can be one person that can show kids that
Hmm.
they've had a positive impact on me, then I become evidence for them
Yeah.
when they feel like, well, no one cares or what am I doing here? They can say, well, this person, right? This person acknowledged this. Like I did this for this person. And so I
Hmm.
think that that's why you do youth empowerment and youth development together, which is like the skills to
Yeah.
take care of yourselves and the skills to lift yourself up, you know?
Yeah. Now, I think it's really cool that that's the stage at which you're not only are you developing and empowering children and youth, but I think when you get to adults, I think the further along you go, the harder it is to go, not work backwards, but to identify
Mhm.
in that self-improvement journey, right? You have to go
Mhm.
so far back into the future to understand why you're upset at certain issues in your life,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So it's like
I like, oh,
it's
go ahead.
crazy. No, it's crazy. It's just crazy to me to see how that's like how it's the same process. It just might be
Mhm.
just a bit harder to identify like the root cause.
Something for and there in the fear, not just even the identification, but the
Yeah.
fear. Like if you've been this way for so long, imagining yourself different is really hard for people and it's really scary. People don't want to call it fear, but it's like a threat. It feels like a threat of challenging who I am. And
Mhm.
we see this everywhere with adults. But I was talking with one of my teens who I've been working with, she's a junior now. I've been working with her since she was in seventh grade and she's doing this kind of thing where she's like tough on herself and she's like I should know better, like I like accidentally fell back on my old ways and I have to like constantly remind her that
Mhm.
she's doing so much more than most people her age are even given the opportunity to in terms of
Yeah.
developing a relationship with herself, being aware of herself. And it's like adults, I would much rather work with kids. And kids are like, it's hard. And I'm like, yeah, now imagine you're 45. You thought 2 years of disliking yourself was hard. Imagine being 45 and that
Yeah.
entire time you've
30 or 40
disliked
years.
yourself. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Oh
Like, I
man.
was like, you got it easy. You caught this
Yeah.
early. Take care of this shit.
Man.
Do it now,
Yeah,
right?
no
Like, do it now.
kidding. Like if you take
Seriously.
it, yeah, and you can prolong it and develop it, and then you're able to do similar work or have the similar kind of attitude that like you and I have, where you have that, okay, like we can not only help other people build these connections, or especially what you're doing, where you're able to like help younger people develop and build skills, both soft skills and hard skills that allow them to just be overall better contributors in our society and hopefully reshape the narrative to being okay with connecting with ourselves and connecting with others. That's very, very
Yeah. And
interesting.
if my kids feel good, if they're not harming other people, they're not harming themselves, and they're happy, that's all
Hmm.
I care about. That's all I
Nice.
care about. That's all I care about because there's going to be people who are out here who are going to want to change the world,
Hmm.
but also there are going to be some people who just want to have the life that they want, right? And if they're taking care of themselves, they're taking care of their family, they have a good relationship with themselves, they're not harming other people, they're not harming themselves. I'm happy for them, right? And because I know oftentimes as I'm doing this work with like youth empowerment, like kids who are doing really amazing work,
Hmm.
sometimes it's like there's this pressure of like we all have to do this big amazing life-changing work. And for me it's like I think what would change society is if more people felt better about themselves. Doesn't mean that
Hmm.
they're not necessarily going to go out there and help other people on this kind of scale, but being
Yeah.
happy with yourself, like the more people that we have who feel safe with themselves, who don't feel so challenged and threatened, who don't lean into things like violence, who don't lean into these things that come from a disconnect from themselves, society
Yeah.
will shift. It doesn't it I don't know. I don't get to talk about that enough, but I had a conversation with a kid who said that to me. They were like, I don't know if I want to if I want to change the world. And I was like, you don't have to change
Yeah.
the
You
world
don't
on the
have
same
to.
scale, right? But the way that you show up in your life,
Hmm.
right? You're going to treat people differently. You're going to like build better relationships that maybe your family's had in the past, and those micro changes contribute to a larger change. So I like
Yeah.
to try to give. That's why I don't push kids often into this leadership kind of stuff unless they're interested into it, where
Yeah,
it's like,
absolutely.
yeah, maybe you'll find that later, or maybe you'll figure out how your work contributes later. But I just want them, what I care about is how they feel. And there are a lot of people who care about what kids are doing, and I care about how kids feel.
Amazing. And now I think that's so, so important. And I think what I want to know is, so we talked about it at the beginning and we've talked about this a bunch. And I think what'll continue to like help your progress exponentially is like your authenticity and your individuality and your uniqueness and everything you've gone through, right? And how you really you steer right into being who you are and stuff. Now, I want to know, do you have to wear different hats or play different roles when you talk to different people of media? We talked a bit about it beforehand in terms of like swearing and stuff and like how you have to act around certain kids, or do you have certain relationships with people that over time you've kind of altered who you like how you are with them? Or I'm curious just how you go about that, if you don't mind expanding.
Shit. I, there you go. No, I mean it's like, this is why I want to be. I don't want my kids to look at this and be like, "This has always been Mr. Donovan. He's always been great at this." I want them to look and be like, "He worked hard at this." And I've
Yeah,
learned, and I've had a lot of tough moments. And there's been moments where I've done projects, or I've worked with people that don't really align with what I want to do. And moving into the entertainment industry, I've met some amazing people, and I've also met some people who are in really high positions of power, versus like where I have in terms of influence and in terms of platforms and stuff. And I think
scary.
that when I started sharing my TikTok, like I made TikTok because kids told me to. And then in the very beginning, if you go to the very beginning of my TikTok, it's like silly videos of me. And that's what the kids like. Like if you look
Yeah,
at my TikTok, the videos that have the smallest amount of views, that's where you're going to find my kids commenting, because it's just me being silly and it's me being
yeah,
myself. But people were really responding to that positive work. And so people would meet me and be like, "You're different than I thought you were," because I only showed that side of myself. But
I
that
see.
created a huge disconnect for me, because 10% of the work is that kind of emotional positive work with kids. And 90% of it is just like acting like assholes and just having fun and
Yeah.
enjoying ourselves and being in a space where we can like feel comfortable to be who we are. And
Hmm.
I haven't figured out yet.
Yeah.
I haven't figured out yet, which is like a big growth mindset thing. I haven't figured out how to kind of bring those things together. So I'm
Hmm.
making content that I get to have fun, and I'm being silly, and I'm showing my humor. And more recently, you can see on my content, I don't care about the engagement. I want to put that out there
Yeah.
so that there's more cohesiveness in terms of this image that I'm showing, because that's who I am. And
Interesting.
when you think about core values, like I told you earlier,
Hmm.
humor and fun are huge core values of mine. And when I
Yeah.
started hating making content, I had like 6 or 7 months past in the past year where I was like really doubting myself and being like,
Yeah.
I hate everything I'm making. I don't want to do this anymore. I
Yeah.
realized, just like I said earlier, hope I mean fun and like happiness and joy are not showing up in my work, and those are my
Oof.
core values. And if
Yeah.
those things are not showing up, it makes sense that I don't want to do it anymore. So
Yeah.
instead of quitting, it was just because I had that awareness, it was just a chance to say, okay, well, how do
Jesus.
I infuse this? How do I find my voice that feels authentic to me, because that is just a part of me. Like
Hmm.
I like to laugh. I like to be really silly. I'm like a little bit of a jackass. Like, and I used to troll the kids all the time. Like, that's one of their favorite things, was me messing with them. And teachers would be like, "Oh, no, 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 boundaries." And I'm like, "I'm not doing anything appropriate. I'm just
Yeah.
joking around with them." And they loved it. And so
Hmm.
as I'm about to go into like speaking at schools and stuff, it's like I
Yeah.
need to like figure out how to be fun again. Did I
Hmm.
cut you off?
Oh no, I was just laughing.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
Man, no, that's so cool. I was just laughing at that 'cause, like I think what it comes down to in terms of everything you said, and I find myself having this conversation with a lot of people, is it all comes down to your intention,
Mm,
right? If at any point it's never malicious intent, right? And I think
mm,
that's the one thing where I'm like, if the intent is just to like break bread or joke around with like the kids and make them laugh and just kind of hold them a bit accountable for making silly mistakes,
mm,
it's I don't there shouldn't, right, there isn't an issue, right, but holding back on part of who you are just so you fit this mold of what you think you should be, I think is very, very, that sounds like it was like it's a tough battle It was like a tough
Yeah.
battle, right? To kind of
Well,
transition into it or out of it, sorry.
and I put that pressure on myself. Like people told
Absolutely.
me I've had some people who've kind of brought it up, but I don't really care. Like some like 65-year-old lady on TikTok telling me not to laugh as much doesn't mean shit to me. But
Hmm.
I put that pressure on myself because it was that same thing we were talking about earlier, full circle, is like I was afraid that if I start showing these other parts of myself, that I wouldn't be valued anymore. And if I'm not valued, then I don't feel safe. So it was like triggering something that's really core to me, which is that fear of like you be good or people won't accept you, which is a huge thing that I think kids deal with in general is this feeling of I have to be good or I won't be
Yeah.
loved or I won't be safe. But the other thing too about joking around with kids, do you know what? You know why else it's important? Because I make mistakes. Not every
Yeah.
joke I make lands. Sometimes I make
Oh
jokes that
no.
go too far, and it's a chance for me to pull a kid aside and apologize, or it's a chance for me to learn that that kind of humor can hurt some people.
Mm.
Humor is a strength, but it can be overused and misused. But for
Yeah.
me to be able to say to the class, you know what, I took it too far. I'm so sorry. Like I apologize, right? Like that's an important moment because it show kids you should apologize for these things, right?
Yeah.
And that
Shows your
sometimes
ownership.
intent versus impact is different, but it's how you
Hmm.
hold yourself accountable that matters, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, I know we're getting in I know we're kind of getting into your timing here. There's one final question I wanted to ask you. But before I do, I overheard you mention in a podcast, I can't quite remember which podcast it was because like they all just blurred together over the last week. Like I was just exhausted trying to dive into like three different people's research. But anyways, not
Yeah.
important. You mentioned a book of like different elite level performers in all their different things, and you
Oh
mentioned,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I was curious, but you mentioned you don't remember the name of the book.
No, I don't. Did you find it?
I think I might have figured it out, but like, what could you tell me more about it? Because I think I might have figured it
Yeah,
out.
it was like on Julia, one of my good friend Julia. She's one of the first kids I started working with. It's his mom, and so she's like one of my best friends, and he is like he's like the original Dono friend. His name is Harry, but he's
Oh,
in
geez.
college now. I was like at her house, and I think I read it on her shelf
Oh,
because it
damn.
just she
Was it
always
like
had these kind of books. It was like a bigger book, yeah.
hardcover?
No, it's not Tools of Titans.
No, I was thinking Tribe of Mentors.
Ooh, I
Yeah,
don't know. I'll have to check it out. I just remembered it was like all these people in these different arenas being like, here's like what helped me be successful. And so
yeah,
much of it was like I had one person in my life, like a coach or a teacher
yeah.
who like had my back. But that wasn't like I don't know if that was like the theme of it, but it was what was sticking out to me because I kept
I
reading it and
see.
being
Yeah,
like, you're like, oh, my teacher one time told me like believe in yourself, and I did, and look at me now. And I just kept being like, one time, like
yeah.
that is
Really?
one person one time. Like, what
Yeah,
if we were way that? And that's what pushed me to be way more intentional. To be like, I will take every opportunity I can to like highlight or lift a young person up or to offer support to them. Because if all these people have done these amazing things, right? Like,
yeah.
I could do that.
Jeez.
I could tell a kid to believe in themselves, right? I can do that. And it was like, it really shocked me. It really shocked me um, to just witness such a huge pattern in every arena. So, like, from
Yeah.
scientists to like writers to athletes to singers, like to teachers to chefs, everything you could think of. I just kept seeing that as a trend, and it helped me realize how important it is to show up for kids in a way that accepts them and pushes them and holds them accountable. I don't teach kids to not do anything. I'm not just
Right.
like, love yourself, who cares, right? It's like, love yourself so you can really step into who you are. And so you can
Yeah.
really live a life that is meaningful to you or meaningful to the people in your life. And it's just like, how do you show up the most for your life? That's
Hmm.
what I want to teach kids. I I'm in this phase now where I'm starting to see kids lives, and I'm starting to see these, I call them kids, but they're like 25 or
Yeah.
you
No
know
kidding.
they're like 20, 22 or 23. Some of these kids are like 25
Oh
because I
wow.
started when I was like 18 or 19. um and I'm starting to see where their lives are going, and it's amazing and it's wonderful, and I had
Jeez.
no idea it would be like that, but I look at them and I can see them, and I'm like, this is that kid who cared about justice. This is that kid that cared about leadership. This is that kid that was always using their humor. And then to see the way that they're showing that in their life,
Hmm.
in their work, or in their family, in their relationships, it's amazing, you know?
I love the way you um reflect on the experiences you've had. Like just like things from like the books you've read or to the like the mistakes and the experiences you've had. Like I love how you've been able to kind of sit back and like reflect on those moments and like really piece them together in your self improvement process. It's really, really fascinating to see. I'm getting a kick out of it. I like it a lot.
Yeah, well, I'm a storyteller. That's something that's like I write something I have not said on any podcast, and I think I would say maybe 3% of the people in my life know this. I write screenplays for fun.
No kidding, eh? Is
I've been doing that for like 10, 12
that
years.
like a
I don't have
passion project, hobby of
it's
yours?
just fun. I just like
Yeah.
storytelling. So I write kids books, but it's
Yeah,
like
that's wild.
everything that I do storytelling events. So I've won a couple of awards in the past few years. I've won some competitions and I just love it. And I think this work is really about what is your story and
Hmm.
really valuing
Wow.
what kids' stories are where they're at. Like I don't have to just I have a kid, I'm gonna say his name, Osvaldo, because he made me so
Yes.
mad. Because I was like, I love you and I'm proud of you. And he's like, you can't be proud of me until I've done something. And he's like, because I was like, oh, I'm gonna come see you soon. And he's like, no, I don't want to see you until I'm at the top and then I'll have earned it. And I was like,
I
shut
love
up, dude. I
it.
love you right now. Like I accept you right now. And he's like, no, not until I've accomplished something big.
Come
And I was like,
on.
dude, you little asswipe. I was like, if I have to wait 7 years till you feel like you've accomplished something for me to see you, like that, I'm not the one, and I get it, and I get
Yeah,
that that is a type of conditional love that exists.
for
I get that
sure.
that is a type of conditional validation that exists. Not me. If you are sad, I'm here for it. If you are excelling, I'm here for it. But I am here for you, and that means everything. And that's why I like storytelling because you get to dive into the everything of everyone in the story,
Hmm.
a good story at least, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll make this quick. One last question, because
Oh, you're
I'm
good. You're
realizing the
good.
timing. I'm like, I want to
No, I
respect your next
appreciate it.
appointment and
It's a
stuff.
lot of
So
flow. It's a lot
yeah,
of flow. I like it.
I don't want to kill it. But I'm like, I do want to respect your time in the same process for the next thing. But so with that being said, kind of looking back on everything you've experienced and like the people who've come in and out of your life for whatever different reasons in your own journey, and feel free to take a second or two to think about this after I ask it. But what is a piece of advice you've received that's stood the test of time in your life?
Um, I don't know. It's like I think I want to pick a more complicated one, but the one that sticks the most with me, which I've gotten from random mentors, random kids, like people in my life in general, I think when I hear it, it resonates the most, which is just like be nice to yourself.
It's so simple. I love
Yeah,
it.
and it's so
Yeah.
hard for a lot of people, and I think it's really important. Like the truth is like we're all going to struggle, and the truth is that some of us are going to suffer, right? And I think that suffering doesn't teach us anything, and suffering doesn't have a purpose. It's
Hmm.
that's what it is, suffering. But struggling is important because life is tough, and
Yeah.
in order to grow and in order to really step into yourself, you're gonna have to do a lot of hard work. But everything, I won't get too deep, but from education to capitalism, right, to politics, like to everything in a lot of
Yeah.
ways, is hard on us. And if you're living in today's world, if you're a young person living in today's world, dealing with all the things that you're dealing with, the fear of the climate change and what's happening with our planet, the violence in America, like
Yeah.
education, the pressure, like social media and what it's doing to you. Like there's so much that feels stacked against kids. There's so much that they're
Hmm.
experiencing. And if they can be nice to themselves, they can be kind and compassionate to themselves, that will have the biggest difference in their lives. And I think a lot of times kids are so anxious about all these bad things that are happening. And I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
and all we really have control over is like how we treat ourselves, like especially at that age. And it's
Ooh.
like, focus on that right now, right? The rest of this stuff will come to you. You will figure it out. But it's just like when you have like I sometimes use this like, metaphor of working with like a kid in your class on a school project that you don't know. And it's like you get paired with a kid you don't know and it's awkward, right? And you're like,
Yeah.
how does this person work? It's like your life is a project and you're working with yourself. And the closer that you are with yourself, the better relationship you are, the more fun, the more like engaged you will be with this project. And I was like,
Yeah.
you got to treat yourself, you got to be your own best friend. That's like the biggest thing I think we need to learn and understand that when we treat ourselves kinder, it's easier for us to then extend that compassion and kindness to other people.
Ooh. I love that. I love that a lot. Dude, this has been it's been really fun. I'm really
Yeah.
great. Yeah, it's flowed so smoothly, and I'm really, really
Mhm.
grateful again for your time and what you've been able to share with me today and just your story and the work you've done. I the only thing I'm more excited for than doing the show is to see what you do next and to see how everything kind of comes to fruition that you've been working on, because I know you're working your ass off. So I'm really,
Yeah,
really
yeah. I was
excited
like, what
for
am I
you.
gonna do next? I was like, what am I gonna do next? Sleep.
Sleep. That's probably
Yeah,
good. Yeah,
that's what I'm thinking
I
about.
love
Ooh, we
it.
just gotta get through this weekend.
That's
Yeah, no, thank
awesome.
you for having me. Thanks for pursuing your passions. Thanks for
Absolutely.
creating a platform and a space for people to share their stories. Um, yeah, I really appreciate being able to be a part of this, and I appreciate the very kind words of support that you offered. And thanks for doing your
Absolutely.
research. That was really cool.
Absolutely.
That was
Absolutely,
really
man.
neat. You said your
Have to.
mom's a teacher. Oh, yeah.
And it's like
That's like you got to do some digging for
yeah, you
that. I
gotta
don't
like
always
listen
talk about
to.
that. You got to
No,
do
that's
some
true.
digging.
That's like 45 minutes into a podcast that you did like months
Yeah,
ago. I'm like, all right, here we go.
yeah. I never
Um,
talked about that. She taught German, by the way.
what?
Ja, ich kann Deutsch sprechen.
So I was just get that answers my question. I was gonna ask, oh, do you speak German? Great follow-up question,
Ambition,
Glenn.
ambition, ambition.
Oh, that's
Only a little
awesome.
bit.
Nice. Yeah, man. So I really, really appreciate it. So thank you very much.